Welcome to the Solution Point, where we talk about solutions to your life, your business, and the law. Today, I have a good friend of mine and our guest today, Francis Jackson, or Jack as I know him. He's a fellow attorney that has a very special niche that he practices in that a lot of people need that service. I'll pass it to you, Jack. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, as you know, Mike, I've been practicing for a while, and I used to have a much broader practice, but over the last, 15 years, we've really narrowed it down to just helping veterans get their benefits. And as you pointed out earlier, unfortunately, sadly, there are lots of people who need that help. Um, so the problem is the VA, or technically the Department of Veterans Affairs, as it's now known, is this big bureaucracy. And when people apply to it for benefits, most people have a hard time kind of wending their way through the bureaucratic maze. And so, as a result, a lot of veterans who are entitled to benefits get turned down, don't get the benefits that they're entitled to. And so, what we are able to do is, with lots of experience in this, is to help veterans kind of wend their way through the process, kind of guide how and where they go, and get them to the point that they can actually get the benefits that they've earned.
And that's a big thing because these veterans, it's not like they just retired from a job and they're wanting benefits. I mean, these are a lot of times injuries that happened, hearing loss, other, PTSD type of things that really do affect their ability to make a living. And it's stuff that at least I never served. So I don't know some of the difficulties that are involved just being in the military. And we need to take care of our veterans because many of them have given the ultimate price. The ones who didn't, we need to take care of them and make sure that they're getting the benefits that they need. It seems like they're working it like if they're an insurance company.
That's a good analogy, Mike. That's pretty much how they handle veterans benefits. It's like a claims adjuster working on a veteran on an insurance case versus the veteran.
How does a typical case come up? Like, I have a friend who's a veteran and he has hearing loss and he's had other things. I have a few friends who they're like 100% disabled, but yet you see them walking around. They're fairly able bodied to be able to do things. They're able to hold a regular job, but they still are disabled. It makes me think that there's probably a lot of people who maybe also are disabled, but outwardly you wouldn't be able to tell. And maybe does that prevent people from applying for benefits because they say, well, I can still walk around and do things?
I think that does hold some people back, Mike. You know, lots of folks think that they're only eligible for benefits if they become totally disabled, which is actually not correct. But to your point earlier, you know, lots of folks that we see, whether they're walking or you know hobbling along with crutches or using a wheelchair, don't look like they might be totally disabled, and in fact, many are not. But the way the veterans benefits system works is that if you have a medical condition that is related to your time in the service, started in service, or became a problem as a result of something that happened in service, then you are eligible technically for benefits. Um, there are some very specific rules about how you establish eligibility and so on. For example, you can't have been dishonorably discharged and still be entitled to benefits. But by and large, if you served and you have a medical condition that's related in some way to your service, odds are you're eligible. Now, what you mentioned earlier actually is quite uncommon for people who are eligible for benefits. Um, It's very rare for them to be able to both hold a job and qualify as totally disabled. It is possible, and there are a few of those folks, but generally speaking, disability means what it sounds like. If you are disabled for VA purposes, you probably cannot hold a job. And that can be, as you suggested earlier, either from physical problems or from mental health problems. PTSD is a common one, depression is another, anxiety is another, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. There are unfortunately lots of mental health issues. And one of the things that seems to happen is the way a lot of mental health conditions emerge is within the time range that would also be the time period people would likely be in the service. So, late teens through early 20s is typically the period when bipolar disorder or schizophrenia actually manifest themselves. A person can be perfectly healthy up until then, and then all of a sudden develop these very difficult mental health problems. And there is some research that suggests that stressful activities, such as going through basic training in the military, may bring those problems to the fore. So, it can be as straightforward as symptoms emerged while you were in the military, or it can be a problem where something happened in the military that causes problems many years down the road, whether it's physical or mental.
Okay, yeah. Along those lines, I guess one of the things that I've noticed in just different discussions with therapists and things like that, usually the first question is, okay, what's the trauma that was experienced before this manifested? Was there a trauma? And basic training can be traumatic, but even more so if you have active duty and you've been in the line of fire, can really be traumatic in those cases.
That's right. For PTSD cases, there is a requirement that you show a traumatic incident um, as the basis for the condition. And as you point out, there are a lot of situations in military service where people encounter traumatic situations, and it's easy to imagine that in combat, obviously, but there are others. We have folks who became severely traumatized in um, just seeing situations where there was a terrible vehicle crash and people were killed, or a helicopter or airplane crash, and they had to go out and retrieve the body parts. It's not really good for people to be in those experiences.
Yeah. So, what is the thing that you see the most as far as, is there some illness or some disability that you see more often in your practice that people are coming to you that are getting denied benefits?
Yeah, there are several that are very common, but the the top ones are hearing loss and tinnitus. The military is much better about it now, but for a long time they weren't careful about ear protection for folks, and then you had this terrible, terrible situation for a number of years where the government bought these earplugs from 3M, and it turned out they were defective, and 3M was not admitting that they were defective, and so for a number of years, uh, people in the military used these, and they weren't effective to stop acoustical trauma, and so they have hearing loss and or tinnitus. Um, and the another one that's very common is back problems. As you can appreciate, there's lots of heavy military equipment, and people end up picking it up and moving it around, and it's not good for the back. Um, and on the mental health side, probably the two most common ones that we see are depression and PTSD. Both of those are very common among veterans. There are, as I mentioned, others that certainly recur frequently, but those two are kind of right at the top of the scale.
I mean, I can see why when you have those type of experiences, like you were saying about the helicopter recovery, those can give you PTSD, stress, and it can also give you depression if you lose people that you went through basic training with. If they're in your team, it's going to hit you harder than any stranger.
That's right. That's
So
right.
you've developed your practice to really focus on this, and you and I have talked a little bit offline as to kind of what the process is and how long it takes, just so that if there's a veteran out there that's saying, hey, maybe I qualify for a disability and I just haven't done anything, what is the time frame from when you file the claim to when it all gets worked out and resolved at the end, just so that people have a realistic idea that it's not like those personal injury cases where they can move really quickly.
The truth is, Mike, it varies enormously. Um, the way you can break it up so that people can understand it. When you file a claim with the VA, they're going to try to make a basic decision on it in 6 months or less. Sometimes it takes up to a year. But if you aren't granted right at the beginning and you have to get into the appeals process, then it takes longer. Um, and unfortunately, the way the appeals process is set up, it can take a lot longer. The way it basically works, it goes like this: you make an initial claim, and you'll get an initial decision, typically within 6 months. Might straggle out to a year, as I said. But if you get turned down, either they say no, we've decided that you're not eligible because your claim we aren't convinced your claim is connected to service, or uh, oh well, yeah, we agree that your claim is connected to service, but we think you only deserve a 0% rating and no monthly payment. If you get to one of those points and you have to appeal, then there are a couple different ways you can go about appealing now. Um, there's higher level review, which is relatively quick, but the trick is you don't get to add any new evidence. So essentially, you're asking the same people to look at the same claim all over again, and not surprisingly, they mostly come to the same decision. Uh, so there's also what's called a supplemental claim, and you can appeal filing a supplemental claim. There, you do get to add some new evidence, but it goes back essentially to the same people again, and so there's not an enormous level of success there. Um, Finally, there's an appeal to the Board of Veterans' Appeals in Washington, and that's the area where we found that you get the best results, but it also takes the longest. Um, those appeals kind of fall into two buckets. If you're over 75, or you've filed bankruptcy, or you have a life threatening illness, then the VA will, what they call, advance your claim on the docket. It means they'll expedite it, they'll try to make it move faster. And so those cases kind of go to the head of the line. That's the good news for those folks. The bad news is that when they put all those cases at the head of the line, everybody else gets pushed back. So if you're not advanced on the docket, right now it's taking 3 or 4 years for people to actually get to a hearing, which is sad, to put it mildly. And what a lot of people find really frustrating is that you get a hearing and you go to the board and you show them that the regional office did not do it properly, didn't get to the right result. A lot of times, what happens is the board will say, yep, we agree with you. They didn't do it right. We're going to send it back to them, have them do it over. And
Oh no.
so they do it over, they deny it again, you go back and you loop. So unfortunately, that can happen. So some of these cases drag on for a really long time. They loop, 2, 3, 4 times. And You can appeal from the board to the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims in Washington, and the court has the authority to set aside an unfavorable board decision. Um, but again, the the remand is the remedy at the court. So if you go to the court and you win, the result in almost all cases, there are a couple exceptions, but in almost all cases, your relief is that they say, okay, board, you did it wrong, go back and do it over. And so here you go on the loop again. Um, and so some folks have uh, begun calling this the hamster wheel, and it kind of looks like that sometimes. So it can take a really long time. Um, what we've found is that if people get denied initially and have to appeal, particularly if they have to appeal to the board, the average result to get all the pieces of claim wrapped up, since it can come in multiple steps, is typically 5 to 7 years.
To kind of relieve people also is if they're successful at the end of that period, all their benefits would continue to accrue during those times.
That's right. So that they can potentially get paid all the way back to the time they initially made the claim. And we've had folks who have been awarded over $500,000 because it took so long for the VA to finally uh, realize that they were entitled to benefits. But you do get the benefits going back, and the ordinary rule is that you can get benefits all the way back to the time you filed your claim. Now, one thing that a lot of people find upsetting, confusing, disturbing is that you don't get benefits back to the day you left the service. You get benefits back to the day you filed the claim if you're ultimately successful. And not surprisingly, there are people who think that's not right or not fair, and they may well be right, but that's the way
That's
Congress has set it up at this point.
Yeah. I think that's a very noble niche that you've taken to defend some of the people who have really given a lot for our country and for all of us to enjoy the freedoms that we have. Yet they're given a bunch of stumbling blocks just to get what they're already entitled to. I do respect your time, Jack. Why don't we jump to the next segment in our talk where we talk about a core value? Can you share a core value that you use either in your business or in your life for making decisions and using it kind of like a compass?
Sure. Our firm is based on four core values. One is application of the Golden Rule, one is compassion, one is decisiveness, and one is pursuit of excellence. And the one I would like to focus on for our purposes is pursuit of excellence. Um, as you can imagine, these claims vary a lot. Um, there are different issues and different kinds of medical problems, and the procedures change from time to time, and the law keeps getting updated. But our goal is to constantly try to improve what we do. Um, we ask everybody to consistently pursue excellence, and in terms of our both our hiring and our internal uh, promotion, that's one of the things that we try to focus on. Is this person someone who is in pursuit of excellence all the time? Constantly willing to reevaluate how they do things, make them better, move forward. And so that's the one that I think um, is probably most beneficial to our clients in the long run. Certainly, compassion is a close second in terms of dealing with the situations that a lot of these folks find themselves in.
That is really a good point because especially when things take this long, it's easy to slack off, to lean back a little bit, not worry about what's going on the case all the time, and kind of let things wane. And it's important to show that excellence to keep the client engaged for this time period.
Yeah, in all candor, I personally think the most difficult part of practicing in this area of law is exactly that. It's keeping clients from getting too discouraged and giving up because in some cases, it just takes a ridiculously long amount of time.
Jack, as always, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I think that you've given us a lot of information. Any veterans out there that may be having this problem, or they may be thinking, hey, I was in the service and I'm starting to have hearing loss, or I'm having other issues that I think might be related back to the service. How can they get a hold of you? Do you have a geographic limit on your practice?
No, we represent people in the entire United States, including, well, we actually represent veterans outside the continental United States, Alaska, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and we have some clients in Europe. But the easiest way for people to reach us, and I think the one that kind of sticks most easily for them is veteransbenefits.com is our website. That's usually pretty easy for people to remember. Um, but they can also call 1-800-JACKSON. That will get them to us.
All right, great. Well, hopefully, some of the viewers will take some of this information and realize that if they have this type of problem, Jackson McNichol has a solution. And thank you very much for being on the program. And to everybody else, if you liked the information that you've gotten, if you want us to continue this program, hit the like, hit the subscribe, give us the different stars, and hit all the bells and whistles so that way you stay in tune. And we thank you for watching or listening wherever you're consuming this program. And remember to stick with the solution point, where we come up with solutions for your life, your business, and the law. Thanks, and we'll catch you next time.
And be sure to give Mike 5 stars for doing this great program.
Thanks, Jack.